everyone, I'm Allison. Thank you for joining me for Where I'm From 138 with Melinda. What have you been reading? I read A Ghost in the Throat by Daring Negrefa. I had to look up her name so many times and listen to her pronounce it so many times because she's Irish, and if you can see the spelling, it's a very Irish name, and it's a summary. Uh, Her obsession with the long deceased poet Eileen, I'm not going to be able to do her last name. And hello, Melinda.
Hi, can you hear me okay? I'm like,
Yes, and you're perfectly framed.
oh, good. I'm just figuring out my AirPods.
Yes, I have not crossed that threshold. I am still, as my children would
Oh,
call that, using string pods.
yeah, it was my children who
Told
convinced
you.
me I was woefully behind the times.
Do you know that these are so uncool that they are becoming cool again?
Yes, if you wait long enough for anything. And I read A Ghost in the Throat.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I read it while I was in my grad program.
I can
It
see that.
was kind of being talked about as a memoir that some of us should read. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I really
I
liked
thought
it.
it, yeah, I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was, I, I read it for a book club a bunch of writers are in, and a woman in it, Nicole, said she felt like it was the first time she'd seen in literature these conversations about motherhood, and um, but that these are conversations we have in our daily life about
Hmm.
motherhood, but they aren't in literature. And I thought that was so well put because it did feel familiar, and yet I don't think I've ever read anybody talk about sort of, in her case, and often in mine, the daily sort of joys of caregiving.
I also like the genre pushing
Hmm.
uh, quality of it. I really like memoirs that kind of delve into that historical piece or something that's going on in culture or society that dovetails with what the author's own experience is. And
Hmm.
that's what I tried to do with my book that I'm trying to birth out into the world. It's not,
I,
it turns out it's like not a great time to have a very Jewish book that you're trying to get out into the world. I thought it was
mm,
either the best time or the worst time, and it's looking like the latter for the moment, but we'll
I'm
see.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but much like string pods, I think that given some time, we will realize, oh, these are stories we need to hear.
I sure hope so. History goes in a spiral, not a straight line.
Sure
And
does.
that's for better or worse.
Yes,
We're in the worst
agreed.
part. Spoiler alert. Yep.
um, yeah, that's amazing. You've read the book and found it to be inspiring. Because oftentimes I read books and I just, then I move on to the next one, and that's why it's fun to have a book club, or so at least you pause and discuss the book, and I do find it always really interesting how the book resonates, whatever the book is, differently for each person based on their life experience. And even if we have the same life experience, i.e. motherhood, our relationship to that experience affects our relationship to the material. And it's
Are
good to be
you
reminded of that.
are you mostly a memoir reader?
I mean, of late, for the past many years, I guess. I
Hmm.
do read some fiction. I read a lot, actually. I really enjoy graphic memoirs.
I just finished one. I have
No,
it sitting here. I just finished it. Will Eisner's
oh,
A Contract with
I haven't read
God,
that one.
which he he's a big inspiration for Cavalier and the Adventures of
Yes,
Cavalier and Clay.
yes.
So, and I never remember how books come into my orbit, but somehow, like it's always like someone's mentioning it on
Hmm.
social media or
Hmm.
something, or there's like
Yes.
some like 3 degree of separation
I think
thing.
too, the multiple for me, it's like, oh, now I've heard about this book a few times. I guess
Hmm.
I'll reserve it at the library and then I'll look at it and I'll see how it, because now I'm old enough where I do not force myself to read books I don't want to read. I've given myself that gift of like, oh, I am no longer in college or graduate school. I can just read books I want to read because there are so many good books.
Do you let yourself not finish books?
Yes.
Yeah, I just did that with something that shall not be named.
I find it to be a really like honestly a life-changing allowance to give ourselves. Like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't have to finish this book. I can actually just pick up this other book and
It's
start
so
reading it.
it's so
Yes.
liberating, isn't it? It's like a really good feeling. And also when you get like north of 50, as I am, you realize that your TBR shelf, you might not get through it in this lifetime, even if you take all your vitamins. So
It's
yeah.
true. I just super curly girl. I don't know if you know her, but I don't. And she just signed on and it made me smile because one of my friends calls her daughter curly girl on
That's my
her.
sister.
Oh, that's so cute because a friend of mine, she doesn't name her daughter. She calls her curly girl on her
Oh,
social media. And so it made me think of Tamara, who, if you watch this, I'm thinking of you. So would you like to read your poem?
sure. Yes, let's do that. Okay.
Hi. Hi, pretty smart ladies. Hi, back.
Hi. Hi, Melissa.
Yeah. Who I think brokered this introduction,
She
correct?
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, she
Yes.
did. Yeah, she is well, I'll talk to you about it after I read my poem, but
Your mom is
I was
also here. She just introduced herself.
oh
Hello.
yes. Hi, Mom. I um I met Melissa because we had intersections on, I think it was Facebook, and post October 7th. Yes, she's
Hmm.
saying yeah. I've really been making a concerted effort to expand my in real life Jewish community, and
Yeah.
she and I discovered we had a lot of commonalities, and we both got an MFA, and we live really close to each other. We didn't know, so we live like something like 10 minutes apart. So we I
Oh,
was
wow.
doing like a little Jews and coffee series. So like
Hmm.
it's like you invented this to kind of form a
Hmm.
community, and that's what I'm trying to do too. So I will read my poem.
Community
Where
is so important. Let
it
me just say before you begin, I
it's
fully endorse community building.
it
It is essential
yeah.
for, I think, life and mental health. And I am having that validated, I think, every day more and more.
Oh,
And finding
yeah.
your community
What
of whatever
what
sort
you're
you want and
yeah,
need.
what you're doing is brilliant because the pandemic, well, we can talk more about this after, but just the pandemic, and then I just think, the human need for belonging
Mhm.
is not, we all suffered the impact of that
Mhm.
worldwide. And then there are all kinds of things going on in the world that make you have to question and revisit where you belong. So I'm just trying to make a lot of efforts around belonging. And I think that the book I wrote is about belonging too.
Mhm.
Where I'm from. I'm from house keys to defunct locks, from cassette tape symphonies and smuggled silver. I am from salamanders under backyard bricks, blinking, wriggling, startled by their eviction. I am from palm trees and birds of paradise, bendable, abundant, messy. They taught me how to grow. I'm from the sound of music and morning edition, from Janos Such and John Gordon. I'm from the warriors and the mourners, from bring a sweater and don't stay out late. I'm from good Shabbos and God forbid. I'm from Santa Monica, Budapest, and the Lower East Side. Manischewitz and Hamburger Helper. From the great aunt who hid my father from Nazis and the Greyhound bus my mother rode out west. From the hallways of two bungalows set to wrecking balls, we rescued photographs of our former selves, strangers we hoped someday to recognize and love. I am from vacant lots and unmarked graves, from faded manuscript and recorded testimony, from survival to recovery.
Thank you. Beautiful. What was it like for you writing this poem, the process of writing this poem?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you to you because in my MFA program, which I graduated last June, June 2023.
Congratulations.
Thank
Melissa is
you.
always so good at putting notes. I've been in numerous things with Melissa, and she's always so good at putting notes. So everything she just
Yeah.
said is so
Oh,
true and so
yay.
beautiful. And I don't know how she does that. Anyway, sorry, it's amazing.
Yeah, she's Melissa is, as I have been calling a lot of my newer friends, she's value added.
Yes, she
Yeah,
definitely is.
definitely.
Any space
Um,
she's in, for sure.
so I want to express my gratitude for this assignment. You did not know this, and Melissa, I think maybe knew a little bit about this, but as you probably know, when you graduate from a program like that and you've done a huge project that really took your heart and soul and years of work, and in my case, not just my writing, but research into my family,
Hmm.
um, there's a big sort of like postpartum thing that happens,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
And and so that combined with what what started happening in the world in October just has contributed to an extended stasis in my writing and
Hmm.
just like a writer's block. And so to have an assignment where it was basically like, here's like a Mad Libs poem for you. And I grew up, I'm a child of the 70s. So I
Hmm.
grew up with the Mad Libs in the
Hmm.
back seat
Same.
of the car.
Hmm.
We didn't have smartphones. So that's what we did.
Hmm.
And it was so like, I just love anything that feels so like low pressure. It wasn't daunting. It wasn't like there was a right or wrong way to
Oh,
go
good.
about this
That's certainly
assignment.
my intention. So I'm glad that came across.
And it was a nice, I've been looking for like sort of containers
Hmm.
to put this body of work I just did in. And when I say
Hmm.
containers, I mean like the book is a container, of course,
Hmm.
but like emotionally for me and just sort of like holistically for me, how do I put a coda or wrap something around this work I just completed? And this is great because everything I talked about in this poem, almost all of it, comes from the work I did on my memoir.
Hmm.
It explores things that I explored in the memoir. So it was so nice for me to kind of like be able to synthesize and summarize that. That was my experience. And I did not, I've watched a few of your where I'm from videos
Hmm.
and listened to how other people talked about their experience with the poem. I would say this was like I sent it to you a couple weeks ago, and or I don't know, a week and a half ago. Part of the reason I did that was because I didn't want to mess around
Hmm.
with it anymore. And so I thought, I'm going to send it to her. Although all of us writers have had the experience of sending something to someone and then go, no, wait, read this
Yes.
one.
And I've had that experience with this poem, and I'm always just like, don't
Yeah,
worry about it. People apologize.
yeah,
Actually, wait, there's another draft. It's like, it's fine.
yeah.
Whatever you want to send me.
But for me, I don't know, I got a strong hit that what came out of me
Yeah.
initially was the way I was
Yep.
just leave it. And
Hmm.
so that was my experience. I really just sat with this for a couple days
Hmm.
with the assignment, and I worked on it over the space of a couple days, and I did a couple like little revisions and yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, good. Isn't that such a great feeling?
Yeah,
I
it's
love that
so
feeling.
great. It's
Hmm.
so great because, I there's this Sturm and Drang like,
Hmm.
especially my book is not, I joke with people, it's beach reading. It's not beach reading. I mean, it depends what you like to read at the beach, but I
Not a
am
lot of
drawn to,
memoirs beach
yeah, not
reading.
a lot of memoir and a lot of memoir, we've got words that have become so much a part of the lexicon that they're kind of overused. But, my book's about intergenerational trauma.
Hmm.
That could mean different things to different
Hmm.
people, but I'm drawn to reading those kind of stories from other people too, because I want to know, um, I want to hear from other people how that is something they wear that is like like they can wear the garment lightly,
Hmm.
where it's not a
Yeah.
yoke, because that's what I'm trying to do, and I
That's
think
really
yeah,
well put. Yeah, I think
and
that
and
I that's my experience reading. And I mean, I have a manuscript as well. I'm not as far along as you, but I'm many drafts in. And I think I was speaking to somebody who read it, and I was saying, I just So often I read for the experience of someone articulating something I know but have yet to articulate. And especially with the ease that a polished manuscript does, and about intergenerational trauma, about many things. And I think that's definitely what draws me to memoir too. It's like, oh, thank you for putting words to that experience that I've also had, even if it's not the exact experience. And I think that can sometimes be a misunderstanding about memoirs, if you can only relate to ones that are exactly your experience. It's not about that uh, at all for me.
Yeah, and so like we're all taught in school, your book, a memoir is not a journal or a diary, and it's not therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting to work on a project like this because there are intersections, right? There
Mm-hmm.
are, you might be, uh, I think a lot of writers write because they have a question, and they don't necessarily write to get the answer to the question, but they write to explore the question.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the case of what I wrote, I would say there are a lot of questions that still can't be answered. So I wrote because I was searching for a way to make peace with
Mm-hmm.
unanswered
Mm-hmm.
questions.
Yeah, I think unanswered questions are part of life. And I think it's completely fair to pose a central question and not answer it, but to investigate it and to try to find your own relationship with it that makes sense to you. I mean, I think that's where most of us end up landing.
Yeah, and I think, like I would say that the Jewish people have a storied, beautiful history of like wrestling with
Mm-hmm.
questions and leaving questions unanswered or having different answers to them in a group and arguing about what the answer to the question is. And, I come from that history and I adore it. And as I posted on my social media last night, I just feel like I'm like become like this. This happened not on purpose, but I've become like a very Jew forward person. Someone who wasn't. Um, it sneaks up on you sometimes, I think, because I don't consider myself a religious person or an observant
Mm-hmm.
person, but I wrote this book and I showed it to my partner at the time. We're no longer together, but he read my manuscript and he said, and I said to him, "Do you think that I've written a really Jewish book?" And he just like couldn't stop laughing. He was like, yeah, think?" I mean, it in the first chapter of my book is about how I, not on purpose, named my son, my first son, a family name that my ex-husband and I were trying so hard to individuate and just,
Mm-hmm.
be our own people and,
Mm-hmm.
not follow tradition. And I ended up naming my son, not only my son is Jonas and my dad was Janosch. So not only is it like the vowels are
Mm-hmm.
reversed, and my son had my dad's name, but there's a Jonas Felsner who I didn't really know about, who, you know, it's just so interesting to me how, as much as we try to, think that we can free ourselves from a story, and, people who've gone through any kind of trauma, I think that's part of it. It's the same thing. It's the making peace, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like I don't need to detach with an axe.
Mm-hmm.
I can detach with love and self-compassion.
Mm-hmm. Have you read Ancestor Trouble by Maud Newton?
No.
Mm,
Do
I
I
think you
need
would like
to?
it. Yeah, I think you would like it. I She is talks a lot about all of these questions, and her ancestors were slave owners, and that's something that she grapples with and talks a lot about. And but she also did really a deep dive on ancestry, finding articles and like really going there with the genealogy, and all that kind of synchronicity you're sort of talking about with your son's name and your father's name, like how she found evidence of these echoes through time, I thought was really beautiful. Stuff she was unaware of, but that was living in her life. And I think
I'm,
we do. I like if I had all the time in the world, or if like Maud, I was really directed and on it, I would be so interested to find out the genealogy of people in my family. But the little things I've tried to do are usually about women, which goes back to a ghost in the throat, and they just don't even exist because they were women. And so then I just get frustrated and just push it all away. And that's one of the things I really loved about A Ghost in the Throat was this idea of a female text and how oftentimes a female text is one that is unwritten in literature.
I just read a book. Oh my gosh. Now I of course can't remember the name of it or it's the author's name is Judy Battalion. It's something like a light, I can't remember, but anyway, she wrote about Jewish women who were resistance
Mm-hmm.
fighters in World War II
Mm-hmm.
and how she was on this journey to find out more about them. And it was like a very sort of like a beautiful accidental serendipitous thing where she found these texts. It's kind of like what you're talking about. She found these texts about these women, but they were written in, she speaks Yiddish, and they were written in Yiddish. And
Mm-hmm.
they were these like out of print stories about these women who did amazing, incredible things, but we don't have them in our history books because the stories don't get told.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
want to like, I just want to like going back to the poem for a second, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to tell you, I mean, I think part of what's so cool about doing this for someone who has those gaps in their history or their or these sort of like
Mm-hmm.
holes in their past
Mm-hmm.
is like when I say I'm from vacant lots and unmarked graves, you know, of course, my grandmother who perished in Dachau didn't get a grave.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad came here from Hungary and he, you know, fled Budapest during the Hungarian Revolution with the clothes he was wearing, you know, walked out of Budapest into Austria. My mom left behind, like growing up in a tenement on the
Mm-hmm.
Lower East Side. And um, the house I grew up in West LA got bought by a developer
Sure.
and it doesn't exist anymore. You know, the house
Yeah.
that my parents spent over 40 years in doesn't exist anymore. And then when my former husband and I
I knew
got
Melissa would come
divorced,
up with the title.
yes,
She did.
that's it. Thank you.
The Light of Days by
It's
Judy
I
Battalion.
think Steven Spielberg is
Mm-hmm.
allegedly he optioned it. So maybe it'll be a
Mm-hmm.
wider known story, but it's a really great book that reads like a novel.
I knew you would
Um,
Google Melissa. I knew.
But anyway, there was the vacant lot of my parents' house, and then when my ex and I sold our house, the only
Mm-hmm.
person who wanted to buy that house was a developer too. And these were two 1926 Spanish
Yeah.
bungalows on two sides of LA that both got like, you know, torn down to the ground. So like you really like sometimes you really can't go back, right? You can't.
Yeah.
Home
You
is
can't. I mean, and
home's
the only
just in
place,
here.
exactly, I was going
Yeah.
to say, the only place it lives is in there. And I think sometimes we find things unexpectedly. Like, I just recently went to Disneyland and I was just overcome with memories of being there as a child. And it would not have been something I would have imagined happening. And it was incredibly powerful and validating. Like, I was here and I remember, and this thing I remember is still here. You know, this random thing, and there's so little in life that actually is like that. So when it did, it was like, oh, this is so, it feels so good, um,
Yeah.
to have that, to be validated in that way. And I think that the poem does work, or it has worked that way for me, because I was a person who struggled with like specific details about my childhood, and the poem and listening to everyone's and writing multiple variations of it, it has helped me realize like the details are there. I just had to open myself to them and to also not think that some were more important than others. Like they're all equally important, these memories that I have. And it's been liberating for me.
Well, I kind of want to ask you
Mm-hmm.
an interview question if I
Sure.
can. I want to know, I can understand doing this project to form a community. I guess what I want to know is how has this project informed your own work? How
Mm,
has it changed your
a
work?
lot.
How has it, yeah,
Hmm.
I want to know like how it's changed, like what you're writing right now or ideas of what you want to work on in the
Well, it's interesting
future.
because I was working on a manuscript with a group, and a woman in there, Kelly, was like, what would be really cool is if you wrote a manuscript and your Where I'm From poem was the spine of the manuscript. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. I don't want to do that. And then I just kind of sat with it for a while, and that's the manuscript that I ended up writing. So my memoir is my Where I'm From poem and essays exploring each sort of line, or I mean,
Oh my
roughly.
God, I love
Yeah.
it.
So it, I mean, really influenced me. And, I ran it by Georgella before I started writing it because I didn't feel like I could do it without her blessing. I mean, legally I can, but I wasn't really interested in doing it without her blessing. And so she was very supportive and was like, sounds great, do it. So that was very, I don't know, meant a lot to me. And it has influenced, I have gotten so much better at writing details and reading something and thinking, oh, like this is not embodied enough.
Mm.
This needs a little bit more uh, something, something, and I think it's like a muscle. I'm sure you've found this. Like the more that I tap into like my 4-year-old self, the more available she is for consultations. So,
Yes.
it's like, oh, okay. Um, and I mean, coincidentally, which I've talked about on here, because Annie Finch also does it, parts therapy. So that also helps. You go to therapy and you connect with your 4-year-old self, your 5-year-old self, and having those experiences with those versions of myself that are so real. I mean, it's uncanny. I can't really describe the experience, but um, I, it's a lot. All of those things together has helped me so much where my intergenerational trauma more lightly, for sure.
I so when I was in school, there was a requirement in my program that you had a main genre
Mm.
focus, which for me was nonfiction. But then you had to have at least one cross genre, and for me that was poetry. And
Hmm.
I maintain that the best memoirs are written by poets. And
Speaking of a ghost in the throat,
yeah,
we just keep going back to that.
exactly. And
Yeah.
like Memorial Drive, and there's
Hmm.
such a beautiful tradition of
Yes,
memoir that's written by
there
poets,
is.
and even like Couplets by Maggie Milner, which
Hmm.
is like a memoir written in verse.
Hmm.
Um, I think the reason for that is because I did poetry for my cross genre the entire time. And the
Hmm.
reason for that is because I feel like poetry is that sort of like surgical way into the sensory that
Hmm.
we look for in memoir
Hmm.
writing. It's you have to have an economy of language. You have to, I mean, you don't have to, but you're looking for you're looking for being in the moment of the
Hmm.
experience in the poem.
Hmm.
You're not, for the most part, like the poems, at least the ones that work for me are the ones where the narrator's not at a remove, but the
Hmm.
narrator's
Hmm.
dropped in.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think that is Maggie Smith. Yes, I was thinking that as well.
yeah,
You can make this place beautiful.
Maggie Smith
Um,
too. Yeah.
I agree, though. I think that poetry and memoir can make some really powerful. Um, they can collaborate beautifully with each other, and I mean, I think of these poems as little micro memoirs, and I think that they can't. The prompt itself can be a useful tool if there's something you want to write about and you're having a hard time getting in. Like I think you can try to direct. I've tried with mixed results, but sometimes I really want to write about something and I write about something else. But um, I it's just helped me be more open to the idea of like these versions of myself are available, and I just need to wait or make a I don't know a fertile soil for them to blossom in. And that has definitely changed my writing because when I first started writing memoir, I felt very like constrained, like, oh, I can only write about things that I remember every single thing about and they're undebatable, which is laughable. But it was just something that I was worried about. And then over time, it's like, oh, well, this is my story and this is what I remember, and that's enough.
Memory is interesting too, of course, for
Yes.
trauma survivors. And like,
Yep.
you know what I've learned is that there is like a little leeway, right? There's like a little bit of a wiggle room. You can take a little bit of license because a memory is a construction. A memory is already partly removed from what actually happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
So,
we don't remember it the same.
and we
And
don't,
that's also something that
yeah.
I've come to more peace with. I don't know if you ever get completely peaceful with it, but definitely like, oh, this is my experience of this. And obviously my experience of all these other things is is all in there too, you
And
know?
I'm fascinated by anyone who writes about grappling with memory,
Mm-hmm.
having a hard time with like an incompleteness of memory or with feeling like they are having to do some fabrication.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wrote one chapter of my book. One chapter of my book is called "All My Fact Checkers Are Dead," and
Mm-hmm.
it's about um, my dad's story of his survivor story,
Mm-hmm.
which is my great aunt
Yep.
saved him and helped him hide, and I wrote it from the point of view of my great aunt who's no longer here,
Yep.
and it's like it it's a genre straddling chapter.
Mm-hmm.
It's fictionalized a little because I don't know what my great aunt was wearing on the day she went and like finagled her way into a job at the Swedish embassy, but I decided she was wearing this color skirt and these shoes, and
Mm-hmm.
like we get to do that, and it's like I
Mm-hmm.
had to give myself permission as a writer, and not just as a writer but as a person who wanted to claim her family's history,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to say like these little details aren't important, but like what's important is like journeying towards some sort of like a wider truth,
Mm-hmm.
and to trust myself, and also to trust my audience, whomever that'll be at some point down the road, that they can make kind of travel that journey with me and not be, like it's like that little editor that sits on your shoulder. I hate her. She's so mean. She's like, you can't do that. You can't say that. I lock her in the closet.
You have a ritual where you lock her in the closet before you start writing.
Yeah.
You get a
Yeah.
cup
Just,
of
I might,
tea, you lock her in the closet, turn on your favorite
yeah.
music or whatever you do.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like for me, it's like I'm so, I've worked as an editor, a copy editor, a proofreader, and it's really hard to get her to shut up
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's really hard to like break rules.
Yep.
But it's so like that's another thing this exercise was great for, like just
Mm-hmm.
feeling like here's an imposed structure, but like I didn't feel like there was, like I was telling you earlier, there's no wrong way to do this.
Absolutely.
It's
Mm-hmm.
play, and the more we can, I think the more we can approach our work, at least initially, as play, the more we can like surprise ourselves and get somewhere good.
I agree. Which is a great place because we need to wrap up. So that's a great. Do you have any other last thoughts? That was kind of a great thought because I
No,
agree
I
wholeheartedly.
I don't think so. I just want to thank you
Mm.
again for this opportunity. It's so great, and it makes me feel like I can maybe go back to my dusty poetry folder
You
from school.
definitely can. You definitely can. George Ella would tell you that you can. And that
Yeah,
our relationship to poetry is all backwards. We don't need to worry so much about the rules.
yeah, yeah. It's so
Yeah.
fun. It's wonderful.
So,
Thank you again,
oh, thank you for joining me.
and
And thank you,
and
Melissa, for introducing us and for being here and providing very useful footnotes throughout our
and
conversation.
and I've shared your project with a bunch of writers, so like people are going to be hitting you
Great.
up to have
The
their
more the
turn
merrier.
doing this.
Please, anyone who's watching who wants to participate, feel free to direct message me. I am happy to hear from you and share the prompts and have you join me. So thank you, Melinda,
Thanks,
and thank you for everyone who joined
Allison.
us and have a wonderful
You
day.
too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.